The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
An absolutely stunning scheme has been uncovered to falsely accuse, wait for it, Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller of sexual assault in order to do what? Discredit the Trump-Russia investigations, maybe try to push the midterms towards Republicans, which now are just 6 days away. We talk about projection from the Trump administration on the program often. And there's projection and then there's projection. So let's go through some examples. Obama is terrible on the debt and deficit. The reality is Republicans don't really care about the debt and deficit, and Trump has blown it up just like George W. Bush did. Another example, fake news slamming the Trump administration is a huge problem. In reality, it's the Trump administration that are actually the purveyors of the fake news, not the victims of it. One more example before I get to this one. Voter fraud and voter impersonation are huge problems. Reality, they're very rare, but those most frequently arrested for voter impersonation, voter fraud, trying to vote twice, are people on the right who are trying to prove a point about how easy it is to commit the fraud. Turns out it's not so easy because they've gotten caught many times now. And then we get to the ultimate projection, which is about false sexual assault allegations. The right insists, and I've interviewed some of them, that the real problem around sexual assault is not victims opting not to come forward because of stigma and fear. It is not the epidemic that some claim exists when it comes to domestic violence and sexual violence, but they claim that the real problem is there are simply too many fake rape and sexual assault allegations, and that it's too easy to get people in trouble. And here they are, caught planning false sexual assault allegations against Robert Mueller, and they got caught. Originally, independent journalist Scott Stedman wrote in The Guardian that a smear campaign was imminent, and he tweeted about it yesterday, saying, "I wasn't going to report on this, but I think my fears are coming true. Based on information that I am privy to, I believe false accusations will be spread about Mueller in order to discredit him and possibly the journalists who are preparing this story." The Atlantic is reporting that a company run by a pro-Trump conspiracy theorist has been offering to pay women to make false sexual assault allegations against Robert Mueller. The Mueller team is aware of it. A spokesman for Mueller says that they've referred this scam to the FBI for further investigation. Several journalists were contacted by a woman claiming to be called Lorraine Parsons, as well as one named Jennifer Taub. They both had pretty similar stories, which were that a man claiming to work for Surefire Insurance, hired by Republican activist Jack Berkman, offered them about $20,000 to make accusations against Robert Mueller of sexual harassment, workplace harassment, sexual misconduct. Now, are these even women who are connected to Robert Mueller? Well, it's not totally clear, at least with one of them. Parsons claimed that she worked for Mueller 44 years ago and barely saw him at a law firm. But the law firm that was cited says we have no record of this woman ever working for us. The man she spoke to allegedly offered to pay off her credit card debt and give her 20 grand. Then Jennifer Taub is the other woman who was contacted. Similar offers were made. And this guy, Berkman, was a big pusher of that Seth Rich DNC murder conspiracy theory as well. Not surprisingly that he's running in these circles. And I you know, Pat, there's another element to this which I kind of hesitate to even get into, which is that there's this Republican kid named Jacob Wall who is like very popular on Twitter, and Trump often retweets him. And it appears that there's a connection between him and this story. He was promoting the story yesterday, the day before yesterday, I believe. And it turns out that the registration of this company, Surefire Insurance, is connected to Jacob Wall's mom. And I don't even know if we should or need to get into that, but like this stinks at every level.
Yeah, I'm not even familiar with this person, but it certainly does stink at every level. And I'm just thinking, even if these allegations were true and there were actual sexual assault allegations made against Mueller, that wouldn't end the investigation. Certainly he would have to step down, I think, but someone would replace him. It's not like every allegation made against Trump and potential collusion between Trump and Russia would go out the window because Mueller went down over some reason like this.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Like Trump was on tape talking about grab him by the pussy. You can just do it when you're famous. You don't even have to ask. And he was elected president. Like even if there was a credible allegation against Robert Mueller from 44 years ago, does it actually even relate to his credibility running this investigation? This investigation doesn't even have to do really with sexual assault, although Donald Trump has. It has to do with someone who has been accused by dozens of women, or more than a dozen women. The bad news, though, is that there are people on the right who think that the story is Mueller has been accused of sexual assault, even though really the story is that people have been caught offering to pay money to women to make fake allegations against Robert Mueller. There are people, and I've seen some of the discussions online, who think that Mueller has actually been accused. And you've got the misreporting combined with the confusion, combined with the ignorance that is sort of the baseline of politics on the right in the United States right now, and you still end up with a story that's going to have to be discredited. And like with voter fraud, they are the source of the false rape allegations, and they got caught. And we'll see what the follow-up is. Hey, I have just a disgusting story that I have to tell you about. We've been talking all week about the shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the Tree of Life synagogue that left 11 people dead and more people injured at the hands, at the end of a barrel of an extremist right-wing shooter. And in response, there have been all sorts of efforts made to reach out to the Jewish community. Local Muslim communities in Pittsburgh have raised significant amounts of money to pay for the funerals of the victims of the shooting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's $1 million fundraiser, which yesterday was at $750,000 for the victims of the synagogue shooting. I don't know exactly where it is today. There have been vigils all over the country. I was just talking to some friends earlier today who attended one in Northampton, Massachusetts yesterday, starting downtown at the old home of the David Pakman Show and ending at the synagogue in Northampton, Massachusetts, and similar events all over the country. I received emails from many people who know that I am regularly targeted by anti-Semitic screeds and tirades and just messages of support. So Mike Pence, campaigning for Republicans, decided he was going to get in on the action after this shooting took place at a synagogue. And since it's the week before the midterm elections, he decided to invite one of the wackiest flavors of rabbis, and I hesitate to even really call the guy a rabbi. He's part of what's called, I call them Jews for Jesus. I think they're more properly known as Messianic Jews, and they are Jews who, unlike Jews, believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And we could talk a lot about Messianic Jews. I've even appeared on the programs. There's this guy called Michael Brown, who has a very homophobic right-wing radio show, who has interviewed me previously, and he claims to be Jewish and a Christian and a Jew for Jesus and whatever. I want to play for you the first clip. And to most of you, this ain't going to sound like any Jew I've ever heard of before, if you know what I mean, right? This guy's called Loren Jacobs, and here he is, a Jewish guy, because there was a shooting at a progressive egalitarian synagogue, and this is the guy that they find talking about Jesus.
God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, God and Father of my Lord and Savior, Yeshua, Jesus the Messiah, and my God and Father too. You are real, and you know everything, and you are powerful, and you are good, and you are able to hear and answer prayers. Please hear and answer my prayers now, O Lord my God. Your divinely inspired and true word tells us, unless you, Lord, build the house, the builders are wasting their efforts. They are building in vain. A political party is like those builders.
You might notice it doesn't really sound like a Jew. And instead of praying for the victims of the synagogue attack, he did pray for the Republican candidates that are running.
I pray that you would enable Vice President Pence to continue to fulfill his many and important responsibilities with excellence. I pray for Attorney General Bill Schuette, who's running for governor, for Congressman Mike Bishop, who is running again for Congress, for Lena Epstein, who is running for Congress, for John James, who is running for the Senate. I pray for them and for the Republican Party and its candidates that they would honor you in your ways, that you might grant them victory in this election.
This is a message, okay? This is a way to kowtow to the Jews and allies who are willing to support Republicans without alienating the extremist base, which is often anti-Semitic. You bring a Jew for Jesus. And to be very clear, I don't care about the religious views here, okay? I'm Jewish by community. I'm Jewish by culture. I'm Jewish by ethnicity. I'm not religious. This is not about the believing of Jesus to be the Messiah. Jews are mostly liberal in the United States. In 2008, it was either high 70s or low 80s% voted for Obama, okay? This is one of the most liberal voting groups in the country. The synagogue that was shot up, where 11 people died and more were injured, was a progressive egalitarian synagogue. To say, okay, Jews were shot, let's bring a rabbi and bring this guy to pray for Republican candidates is disgusting, and these people have no shame. They are vile, disgusting, and depraved. And this is, you know, Pat, how we've been talking about those signals? It's another wink, wink, nod, nod moment that, yeah, we're with the Jewish people because they got shot, but we're bringing a Republican Jew for Jesus who has almost no shared traits whatsoever with the majority of the Jewish community in the United States. And it is a pandering attempt, and it is absolutely vile. And as a non-Jew, Pat, do you get why it's so disgusting, or does it just seem like, Jew's a Jew? I don't know.
Well, I wasn't familiar that there even are Jews for Jesus. I thought Jews for Jesus were just Christians, and that if you accept Jesus as the Messiah, then you're a Christian. So this is all very new to me, and it's astonishing how the Trump people were able to mess this up. It seems like a slam dunk. You just invite some run-of-the-mill rabbi, right? Someone who's going to give a speech that's apolitical and who in some ways matches with the ideology of the people at that synagogue who were shot up, and they managed to mess it up. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I would actually argue that they may not even see it as messing it up. I mean, I think that they did it deliberately. And to make this even worse, the Messianic Jews are denouncing this particular guy. Apparently, Loren Jacobs was stripped of his ordination by the Messianic Jewish movement 5 years ago. They got a fake Jew. You can't write this stuff. And I haven't said that for a while. Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Been mixing it up a lot on Twitter lately. Not sure if you've noticed. Also, the program is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. Follow us. Quick break. Big show for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let me say a big and quick thank you to Kevin Griffin today, who's today's new member of the day. This is a program that doesn't just appear out of thin air. We are funded and supported by really great people who choose to sign up for membership, like Kevin Griffin. And one of those folks who's been with us for more than 5 years, since 2013, is Liz Tomeo, today's sustaining long-term member of the day. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. And also, please, if you have 2 minutes to take a survey for us, we are doing a survey to continue our outreach and improve the program and improve advertising opportunities. So please go to davidpakman.com/survey. This will take you 2 minutes, and it'll really provide us some valuable information about our audience. I would really appreciate it if you did that. It would be a big, big help to the program. It is time for Hatriot Mail, and much like what's going on in politics in general, Hatriot Mail continues to get more extreme and concerning. If you've never heard of Hatriot Mail before, this is what we mean when we say Hatriot Mail.
Because we cling to our guns and our God. but somehow totally cool with a billionaire who wants to assault our wife. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Today's Hatriot Mail is horrifying. I don't know what else to tell you. Let's take a listen to it and see if we can make heads or tails out of it.
I used to be left until I caught on to bullshit like yours. I've thankfully only seen one video of yours. Do you make us out to be idiots? You are what leads to hashtag fake news. You are joining into an echoed chamber of leftist bullshit. You come like of as complete idiot.
That last line aside, this is actually a really serious problem. The problem of projection from the right exists on many issues, as I talked about at the top of the show today, but on fake news in particular, it is a massive problem because the right has very successfully, you know, the things I give Trump credit for are successful propaganda initiatives. And one of the most successful ones has been the use of fake news as a way to brand adversarial and investigative news outlets. And those most loudly shouting about fake news are actually the primary purveyors of that fake news. So this is a really serious problem, and it has worked. If you want to anger the Hatriots or to tell them you're not going to be pushed around by them, use the coupon code Hatriot40 when you sign up for a membership at www.joinpakman.com. You save 40%. And 236 Hatriots cry every single time you do it. And while you're on our website, go to davidpakman.com/survey. Take a 2-minute survey that will be really useful to us in improving the show and attracting advertisers that are a good match for our audience. There's an interesting follow-up I want to do about Kanye West, the rapper and hip-hop artist. I don't really do much celebrity culture stuff on the show. I don't really care about Kanye West's opinions about issues in principle. But when he became arguably the most famous black Trump supporter in the world and started showing up at the White House and wearing MAGA hats, it did become interesting. And Kanye West made all sorts of strange statements, unclear whether we can attribute them to political brainwashing, confusion, ignorance, or just him being off his meds, as he has said he is before. This included saying slavery was a choice. He had this very strange demeanor, as much indicative of, as I said, of mental illness as political ignorance when he showed up at the Oval Office with Donald Trump for that now infamous bizarre meeting. And he has been responsible for promoting supposed former liberal and current fellow black conservative Candace Owens, who is one of the most toxic liars in the political landscape right now. And whatever was in Kanye West's mind when he was doing this stuff, he has become a tool to provide cover to those who want to argue that Trump is great for black people and other minorities. Whether or not that was Kanye's intention, he has been used in that way. And based on a series of tweets that he sent last night, he appears to have broken with Trump and now says he was used to promote things he doesn't actually believe in, which is exactly what I've been saying for months. Let's look at some of the tweets last night, starting with, quote, "My eyes are now wide open and now realize I've been used to spread messages I don't believe in. I am distancing myself from politics and completely focusing on being creative." Also saying, "I support creating jobs and opportunities for people who need them the most. I support prison reform. I support common sense gun laws that will make our world safer. I support those who risk their lives to serve and protect us, and I support holding people who misuse their power accountable. I believe in love and compassion for people seeking asylum and parents who are fighting to protect their children from violence and war." So it appears Kanye is backing off of Trump. He's backing off of this movement meant to get black people to quit the Democratic Party without making any actual political arguments about why black people should leave the Democratic Party and become Republicans. And it's really important to recognize that even if we don't really care that much about Kanye West's politics, other people do because of the size of his following. So I actually think, Pat, that even if we can say this entire charade is attributable to ignorance or mental illness or whatever you want to say, I do think it's important that he went on Twitter and said this.
Well, hey, now that he's coming out as slightly progressive, at least if you look at those tweets, maybe we can embrace him. Maybe Kanye West will become a fan of the David Pakman Show, and we can go around the country touring with him, giving speeches with him, and he'll be our biggest fan. It'll be great.
Yeah, that's the risk, which is I still don't really care what he thinks. And I have no interest in engaging with Kanye West on politics in particular. I mean, I would, of course, gladly welcome him on the program, but I have no particular interest in it. But it does matter because people are influenced by what he says. And also importantly, and I'm really glad he did this, he specifically clarified that he has nothing to do with this movement called the Blexit, black exit from the Democratic Party that Candace Owens is involved in. He tweeted about that as well, saying, I introduced Candace to the person who made the logo, and they didn't want their name on it, so she used mine. I never wanted any association with Blexit. I have nothing to do with it. You have to know what he's referring to even understand the tweet. But that's what he's talking about, this Candace Owens movement about black people leaving the Democratic Party. So question one, is this national nightmare of Kanye and Trump coming to an end? I hope that it is. The reality more than anything, Pat, is I see a guy who's not well mentally. I think the best thing he can do is to just take a break, period, not just from politics. And it's important that when I say that, you understand I'm not excusing Kanye's decision as an adult to get involved with Trump, but he was displaying signs of mania during that Oval Office visit and in other videos. He doesn't seem to be doing well, but nobody forced him to meet with Trump. We should understand and empathize with people who are struggling, but the decision to meet with Trump and to go to the Oval Office was his decision.
Yeah, he's certainly a very outspoken individual, but you can channel that put it into something else aside from politics, at least for the meantime. I always find it very strange when someone is initially a liberal and then the next year they're a conservative and then they go back to being a liberal. I think it, ruins their credibility, at least to me, but other people are ready to grab onto that and, as I said before, take him around the country and use him as their champion.
Yeah, and the political awakening thing that you mentioned, we've talked about that before, and this isn't about Kanye specifically. It's not about anybody specifically. I don't know many people that end up having significant political awakenings where their politics drastically change as adults. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's a country of 340 million people. Of course that happens. But when someone claims that their politics have changed so drastically, and Candace Owens, I don't know how old she is. She must be around 30. And so she was, I guess, in her mid to late 20s when she had her awakening. I think it's important to look really closely at that because it's not the most common thing. Now, the right is I was looking online this morning. The right is already attacking Kanye, saying he's back on the plantation, which is how they like to say that black people are slaves to the Democratic Party. It's already happening, and there's no surprise there. But big picture, this is good. Bigger picture, I still don't care what Kanye really has to say about this stuff. Make sure you follow me on Instagram at david.pacman. Follow the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show to see a behind-the-scenes picture of the Pat Cave at the new studio. I will also be doing a tour of the actual studio room sometime soon when it's a little bit cleaned up. Quick break. We will be back right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It is great to be joined today by Nicole Mafi, who's the daughter of Paul Kingston, leader of the Kingston Group and prophet and presiding priesthood of the LDS Church. She is author of The Leader's Daughter. Where to even start at this point, Nicole? I mean, your story is so interesting. Maybe we can just give our audience an overview of sort of the religious upbringing that you were born into, and then maybe that will get us talking about polygamy, Mormonism, and everything else that's in your past.
All right. Ready when you are.
Yeah, no, go ahead. So I mean, what religion were you born into?
I was born into, so there's the mainstream Mormonism, and then there's the breakoff of the fundamentalist Mormonism. And I'm from the breakoff, where they live polygamy, they live consecration, and they live the original Mormon doctrine. Whereas the mainstream has let some of those original principles go a little bit.
Do you know at what point there was this kind of separation where what we would consider kind of like the modern Mormon church stopped adhering to some of those original principles?
Yeah, in 1890, then Utah was trying to become a state, and the problem that they were running into is the government didn't like polygamy, and so they had to sign the 1890 manifesto that stopped all polygamous marriages. It didn't disavow the ones that were already in practice, but it did prevent new ones from happening. And then in the 1900s, then that's when they said no more polygamous marriages, and they stopped everything.
And what was sort of the dynamic of your father's role within the Mormon church, but also this sort of offshoot?
So my father was never actually in the mainstream Mormon church. His grandfather started my group in 1935, and my father was born into it.
And what were some of the characteristics of that subgroup?
So that subgroup lives consecration, where they believe everything is turned into the church, and the church decides how everything is used, all the resources and everything. In fact, it's a lot like communism. And then they also live polygamy, which is more than one wife.
So in thinking about your childhood, you were born into this. Well,
Yes.
I guess, first of all, what percentage of the... let me even back up. How big is this subgroup, and what percentage of that group is living the polygamous lifestyle?
There's about 5,000 people, and I would say 90% of them are living polygamy.
And when you talk about living polygamy, we're talking about how many wives in general?
My dad had 27. Now that's a lot for one man, even in my own group. In fact, the next one I know of is his brother, who had 15. Most of them have 3 or 4 or 5. The leaders all tend to have more wives, but most of the followers have 2 or 3.
And when you were growing up, I mean, at what age did you realize that most of the world in the United States is not polygamous?
I was actually, so my dad had me in a public school for kindergarten and first grade. And then he pulled us out and put us into his own school. And then at that point, we weren't allowed to socialize with anybody outside of our community. And so it wasn't until I was in my teens, 14, 15 years old, and I had graduated high school and I had gone to college, that I realized that this wasn't normal.
And when you were growing up, did you literally believe that, other than the lifestyle stuff, were you sort of like a literal believer in the doctrine and teachings of Mormonism that were part of your upbringing?
Actually, I believed in all of it. When I was younger, in fact, when I was 12 years old, I planned on being a second, third, or fourth wife. I believed in all of it until I got much older and started seeing differences in the outside opinions and the order opinions. The order is the name of the group I come from. And I just started seeing all the differences, and I realized how wrong the polygamy part was.
That's interesting. So it was the polygamy part specifically that was like the first thing that struck you as something is not right here.
Yeah, I watched my mom live the lifestyle, and I watched her very unhappy for a lot of years, and it really broke my heart. And it wasn't until I had actually spoken with other wives that were also very unhappy that I realized that it wasn't a happy lifestyle.
Can you talk a little bit about, you said you were on your way or thought you would become a second, third, or fourth wife. What's the significance within the group of being a first wife versus like a subsequent wife?
The first wife is usually the prettiest, the one that is capable of running the family, I guess, or the one that is going to run away if she doesn't get to be first wife.
And were you starting to be sort of groomed in this direction when you were, I don't know, a kid, a teenager? Like, what starts to be the preparation for being part of that?
I feel like you're kind of groomed from birth. You're taught in your prayers. And I mean, at 2, 3 years old, you're taught to say your prayers and find the person that God wants you to marry. And then it goes up. You have marriage classes starting from age 12. You're groomed pretty much from birth to be the spiritual wife that they want you to be.
And are there people that resist, or is it basically total cultish groupthink and the sort of resistors are pretty few and far between?
The resistors are pretty few and far between. In fact, I'm only the 5th of my father's 200 plus children that have left. He's had a couple leave since me, but the majority of them stay and believe in the community. And
when you have 200 kids, do you even know all of them? Do you remember the names of all of them? Like, what are the logistics of that?
I don't think he does. I would say that he does not remember all the names.
And just doing kind of math, I mean, we're going to get into the sort of philosophical elements of leaving, but just from math, if you have 20-something wives, are you spending like a day a month with each of them, or what's the day-to-day life of a polygamist?
My dad has, you got to keep in mind, my dad has more wives than most, but he came home once every 2 or 3 months, and it was usually around birthdays and anniversaries that he was home. And then when my mom had a night every 2 or 3 months, then he would come home for that.
Wow. So. I mean, that's just that is incredible. So talk a little bit about when you started to sort of consider that this may not be the place for you and kind of seriously start to think about leaving.
I had a lot of sexual assault growing up as a child, and so that kind of put me into a state of depression where I felt like there was something not right. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that there was something wrong with everything going on. And so that kind of planted the first seeds. And then as I got older and I went to college and I started seeing different points of view, there was a lot of racism in my group, and I had a really hard time with that. It's a very sexist community, and I had a really hard time with that as well. So it just little seeds were planted along the way to kind of lead me astray, I guess.
Can you talk a little bit about that? So maybe let's take the racism part first. Like, in what ways was this a racist group?
They originally taught that Black people have an extra bone in their body. That kind of goes to show. And then you're not allowed to socialize with anybody of color. You're not allowed to marry anybody of color.
And that actually seems, I mean, at one point that was sort of a mainstream Mormon belief, wasn't it, that they have backed off of over the last several decades?
Absolutely. In fact, it wasn't until the 70s that Black people could hold the priesthood in the mainstream Mormon community. They're still not even close to that in polygamy.
And then as far as the sexism part, can you talk a little bit about the ways that manifested?
Women are pretty much just a tool. They're not really people where I come from. They're just a tool for a guy to get to heaven.
Interesting. And in terms of roles within the community, are there, when it comes even down to like jobs and that type of thing, I mean, is it that specifically outlined what it is that women are allowed to do?
They're pretty much just told to do whatever their husband tells them to. Some husbands will want their wives to work to bring in income. Some wives will have to stay home with the kids. It just depends on what role the husband wants her to play in that family. And it really just is up to the husband and how he governs his own family.
So you start to develop a plan to get out. What do you do? How do you think about it?
Honestly, I took it one day at a time. It was really a struggle to even wrap my mind around the fact that I was going to leave. And I kind of knew that it was coming, but I couldn't really wrap my mind around what it meant.
Yeah.
And so it really was just, I made a plan and I put that plan into place, and I kind of just put one foot in front of the other. And then finally I realized I was out, and it just snowballed from there. I got a job. I did have a lot of help. In fact, I had a sensei that I was really close to. And he really just helped me put a plan into place and say, okay, this is what an adult does on the outside world. And I mean, you've got to get a job, maybe start saving some money. You've got to have a car. And he really helped me put the logistics into place and kind of helped me make a plan to follow.
And Nicole, when you say you had a sensei, are you using that word in the sense of like this was a martial arts teacher, or does that have a different meaning that you're using?
No, he really was a martial arts teacher.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know if maybe like within this group, the sensei means something else. So, who did you tell in advance of leaving?
Nobody. I couldn't. In fact, about 3 months before I left, then I sat down with my 2 closest friends and I told them, this is the choice that I'm making and I still love you and I'm still here for you, but I can no longer stay in this community. And one of my friends asked me, she said, will you wait until my wedding? Because if I left before her wedding, I would not be allowed to attend. And so I agreed. I waited until her wedding and I was one of her bridesmaids. And then after that point, that's when I left.
Do you, I mean, say as much or as little about this as you want, but do you still live in physical proximity to where your family is, or have you moved very far?
I haven't. I've moved probably about 30 minutes away from the majority of them. So it's not super far, but it's not. They're not in my backyard.
And did you receive any contact from people initially, and are you still in contact with people from your family?
A lot of my full siblings I've kept in contact with. Some of them have married into the community and have become second, third wives, and they're not allowed to speak to me. But for the majority, I do keep in contact with my full siblings. My mom and I struggle, but...
Yeah, I mean, is she, I guess first question is, strictly speaking, is she forbidden from having contact with you?
She was initially, not necessarily forbidden, but very strongly discouraged. And my siblings were all forbidden to have contact with me for a long time. But then after they became 18 and my dad kind of realized that, he didn't really have as much control over them. But a lot of my siblings are also forbidden from talking to some of the people that are still in the community because they talk to me. So there is that control in that aspect as well.
Can you talk a little bit about the ways in which the organization, the group, exerts control over people, and whether that's physical control or psychological control, and sort of like what you had to break through in order to get out? What are the tactics that they use?
It really is more mental control than anything. As far as physical control, my dad tried to prevent me from buying a car. He took my money, so I wasn't allowed to, as soon as he realized what I was doing, he took my money and I wasn't allowed to take any more of my money that I had earned. So as far as he does things like that physically, but a lot of it really is mental and emotional control. I mean, if you leave, you're not allowed to see your family. You're considered the devil, an apostate, or whatever word they use for it now. But it really is more mental and emotional control.
When you talked about the fact that there was sexual abuse, is in general, is there significant physical abuse used, either like as a discipline tool or to ensure compliance?
Yes. So my dad, when I was 6 years old, he actually beat me with a piece of a bed. Wow. After his brother went to prison for third-degree child abuse, or I think it was felony child abuse, if I remember right. After he went to prison for that, then a lot of them stopped using such harsh abuse tactics, more because they were afraid of going to prison. But they do still use very abusive tactics.
The last thing I want to ask you about in the limited time we have is, in the United States, polygamy, strictly speaking, is against the law. So can you talk a little bit about how that is circumvented and sort of how they have this de facto polygamy, even though it is against the law?
The way that they get around it is he doesn't actually marry the subsequent wives. He'll get a marriage certificate for the first one, and then the second and third and fourth, it's just a spiritual ceremony. So technically, there's really no way to prove that they're living polygamy because there's no paper trail.
Got it. Pretty straightforward, in fact.
Yeah.
The book is incredible. We've been speaking with Nicole Mafi, who's the author of The Leader's Daughter. She is the daughter of Paul Kingston, leader of the Kingston Group and prophet and presiding priesthood of the LDS Church. Nicole, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This is pretty funny. Every once in a while, Anthony Scaramucci sort of makes some sense, but it's all sort of in a very strange context. And in case you've forgotten, Scaramucci was Trump's, I guess, maybe third White House communications director, maybe even fourth. Didn't last long, just a few days, and he showed up on CNN and he was asked about a bunch of different things. And he made two statements that I found interesting. One is that he said Donald Trump likes to lie. And number two, he said that Donald Trump should probably tone down the lying. It's sort of an awkward exchange, but I like it, and I'm going to play some of it for you now. Let's take a look.
Do you think he knows he's lying?
Yeah, I think he does, yeah.
The reason I asked...
I think he likes it, actually.
He likes lying.
Yeah, I think he likes it because I think he likes the fact that people are talking about it, and he likes the fact that it's like taking my finger and like putting in one of the two eyes that you like on your face.
Whose eyes is he putting the finger in? Because that's the part of it that I don't get. If he likes lying, what would you call someone who likes lying?
You know, like a rascal, like a scoundrel. You know, like a...
President's a scoundrel.
Yeah, it's a smirk. There's a smirk on his face when he's doing it. I mean, there's also an entertainment aspect to it.
Again, I asked you, what do you call someone who likes to lie? You say a scoundrel. Another thing you could call someone who likes to lie is a liar. Is he a liar?
Okay, well, we both know that he's telling lies. Okay, so if you want me to say he's a liar, I'm happy to say he's a liar. But I'm telling you that those people that I wrote about in that book and the research that I did on it, on the levels of the weighted average of what they really care about, they care way less about that, John, and they care way more about, okay, we finally have a president that's my advocate. And so all of that other nonsense that he does, that existential nonsense, is less important to them.
That may be. I just don't like, and I think you and I agree on, I don't like when people say, oh, because someone didn't go to college, they don't care about lying. Because I know for a fact that people do care about lying. Your book, The Blue Collar President, I know you explain yourself.
Okay, good. Let me rephrase it because I think it's super important for everybody to understand. Nobody should lie. I'm not a big believer in lying, but politicians happen to lie.
You want to say that to the camera, to the president?
Nobody should lie.
Mr. President?
But, you know, you're a politician now, so politicians lie when their lips are moving, and so all these people lie. But you should probably dial down the line.
So there's a bunch of interesting stuff here, actually. It's not just like another weird Scaramucci moment to write off. Number one, Scaramucci says they don't really care about Trump's lying, that Trump's base doesn't really care about Trump's lying. That's probably true, and what you have to remember is that Scaramucci is also a huge, huge liar. So it's interesting to hear his perspective on Trump's lying. I believe that Trump's lying is much more complicated than Scaramucci just saying you probably shouldn't lie anymore, because Trump's lying seems to be both pathological in nature, but also Trump actually seems to believe the lies once he tells them enough times. We've gotten reports, like, for example, with the 3 to 5 million illegals who supposedly voted for Hillary Clinton. We have a number of reports from inside the administration that say Trump talks about that privately, or at least as recently as a few months ago, Trump would continue talking with people about that privately. So it does appear that he starts to actually believe the lies, number one. Number two, there's been no downside to Trump lying. He gets fact-checked, and then they call the fact-checkers fake news, or at least his base does. When his base can't deny that he tells any lies, they basically do what Scaramucci did here, which is to say, listen, politicians all lie, but Trump is doing the right thing, so who really cares about the lies in the end? And that got me thinking about the interview. The more interesting conversation to have with Anthony Scaramucci would have been how the lies, even if the base doesn't care, even if politicians, quote, all lie, what about the impact that Trump's lies have on other world leaders? Because just insisting that Scaramucci called Trump a liar, which is what John Berman did there, it's entertaining, but it doesn't really get to the crux of the issue. And I saw a comment online saying calling Trump a liar for 2 years hasn't dented his popularity, so what's really the point? I agree with that, but that's disturbing. The fact that people are bored of the president constantly telling demonstrable lies is not good for the country. It's not good for democracy. And it's this hyper-normalization where we are bored now with stories about Donald Trump telling demonstrable lies. Let's talk about the Proud Boys militia, which has been banned on Facebook, and right-wingers are furious. If you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I envy you. The Proud Boys are this right-wing militia group that's led by right-winger Gavin McInnes, and they engaged in violence in New York City after a recent speech. McInnes regularly encourages violence on his program, and another story that we've been following have been the stories of bans of Alex Jones's InfoWars content on a bunch of different platforms. YouTube is an example, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, others. Facebook has now confirmed to Business Insider that they are banning the Proud Boys and Gavin McInnes from Facebook and from Instagram. Facebook's explanation as to why is that they have clear rules about hate groups, that Proud Boys is a hate group, that McInnes encourages that hate as a leader of the group, and that's it. The Proud Boys are accused of attacking protesters on October 12th, of shouting homophobic slurs, of beating and kicking protesters. 5 of them have been arrested so far. And what's interesting about the Proud Boys, and horrible, is that their primary channel for recruitment is the internet. They are doing this with Facebook, and by banning them, Facebook is directly preventing the growth of a hate group. So let's talk through the arguments against this ban. First of all, the idea that this is new is wrong. Twitter banned the Proud Boys back in August. That was before they beat protesters in New York City, so fewer people knew about them. Secondly, that this is some kind of double standard, and people are already saying online, what about Antifa? Well, as soon as people associated with Antifa advocate for violence on Facebook or Instagram, or recruit people to commit violent acts on Facebook or Instagram, I will be the first one saying, ban them. If you're looking for people to defend violence on this program, whether it's from the left or the right, it's not going to be me. Maybe Pat will defend them, but not me. Antifa is simply not organized in the same way, though, where they are vetting and recruiting members in this way. And thirdly, Pat, there's the free speech argument. Conservatives have a very weak case here because Facebook is a private company. They have terms of service. Facebook determined that those terms of service have been violated. If you want to change the law to force Facebook to have to allow this, fight that battle. But nothing illegal is happening here whatsoever. And we actually have a piece coming up about that, Pat, a long-form piece about social media and censorship and free speech in terms of service. We're going to outline that entire debate. That's only one part of this. And the other funny thing, I don't know if you saw this, Pat, is that there are people saying McInnes is Canadian. He doesn't have American citizenship, and he's inciting violence and a hate group. Why isn't he being sent back to Canada? To which I would say, I would not hold my breath waiting for that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I think this case is much more clear-cut than some of the other ones, like Alex Jones and some other conservatives getting banned from Facebook and other social media sites. I mean, Gavin McInnes, he went on Joe Rogan's podcast. He describes the Proud Boys as a gang and said that the 4th step for joining the gang and being fully immersed in it is to commit an act of violence, like to get into a fight, to get arrested. If that's not inciting violence, if that's not a hate group, I don't know what is. And you know, he should certainly be banned from those platforms, but maybe they should also look into some sort of legal repercussions too.
Yeah, and I think that their response to that, which is many people have pointed out, rightly so, that he said a bunch of this stuff on Joe Rogan. I guess we were supposed to believe that it was satire. I haven't seen the episode. I mean, is it at all believable to say he was merely joking?
No, I would say that if you listen to him fully in context, going back and forth with Joe there, I take him at his word. I don't think he was joking. I don't think it was satirical. I think Joe Rogan was taken aback by what Gavin McInnes had to say, but McInnes certainly came across as serious.
Last thing on this, I don't want to belabor something that really isn't that controversial. Does anybody find it odd that the Proud Boys are a group of white men who feel oppressed and emasculated in modern day American culture? Like, they present as alpha males, but when you consider that in modern day America, they're saying they are emasculated and oppressed as white men. Is that actually alpha behavior? It's sort of something to think about. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's an interesting voicemail I got connecting abortion and the minimum wage. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I want to hear a Democrat come out and say that an abortion is oftentimes an economic necessity, and if you think abortion is murder and you don't want to raise the minimum wage, look at your own hands. You're dripping with blood. The blood's on your hands. But, of course, they're too mamby-pamby to fight back hard. They will not fight.
Yeah, so the point here that is being made is a good one, whether or not you like the delivery, which is that a lot of abortions are happening for economic reasons. People are otherwise open to the idea of having a child, but they recognize that their economic circumstances wouldn't bring that child into an environment that would be a positive experience for that child. If you increase the minimum wage, you do enable more people to make the choice responsibly not to have an abortion. But listen, you're thinking like 2 or 3 layers beyond just the obvious talking points that we hear from the right. So good luck getting them to engage with you on that level. We've got a great bonus show coming up for you today. I hope you'll join us. You can get access by becoming a member at www.joinpacman.com or by making a $5 a month pledge on Patreon at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. I look forward to talking to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.